Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very janky stream. I don't know if anyone's going to be joining. Everyone might be busy eating turkey. Thought I would stream on Thanksgiving night, just see who is out and about. Maybe there's some people that are bored. If you've done all your family stuff, maybe just chilling at home. And really figured what I would focus on tonight would be going through all my Castlevania games. So I know I probably have some Castlevania fans that watch my channel. Thought it might be fun to go through those, but also just hanging out on Thanksgiving night. Got nothing planned tonight, and thought I'd see who's out and about. So I'll hang out for a few minutes, see if anybody pops on. Having troubles with my laptop. So if my stream popped up a little early, I apologize. There was an issue with that. And then I haven't used it since we switched into daylight savings time or whatever this time is that we're in now, standard time. I can't keep it straight, which is which. But my laptop doesn't seem to think that we're in the new time, and I don't know how to fix that. I'm working on it right now. I'm sure a lot of people would be like, how can you not figure out how to set the time on your computer? But it's not as easy as it used to be. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, yeah, I thought I'd talk about some Castlevania games, see who's out there, who's out and about. I did just recently get the new, oh man, that looks terrible. There we go, it's better. The new Castlevania collection for PS4. And this has, I think this has been out digitally for like 2 years, so I'm sure a lot of people already played this. But since I'm such a physical stalwart, I have not played this until now. So it's got a lot of Castlevania series stuff on here, and you'll see a lot of these games discussed tonight as we go through this. But thought I would talk about kind of the physical versions of all the games in my collection versus just saying, hey, I got this shortcut to having everything. Because ultimately I had to hunt down a lot of these games over the years to get to where I am with this collection. So this is a really nice collection. I will say that I've been playing this quite a bit. For those of you who are new to the series, I would say this is a great place to start. It has a lot of different screen options and settings and things like that I don't know, I guess are good. I haven't really found, for some of the older games on here, some of the 8-bit games, I don't think they look right. And even with like 6 different screen options for settings, they still just don't look what I'm accustomed to. Even on like modded NES systems like I have, like RGB modded, they just look different on there than they do on here. So a lot of people may not bother at all, but that would be like my one gripe about this so far, just kind of seeing how that works out. But I do think they did a pretty good job with the game selection, but not an awesome job because they skipped over some stuff that should, to me, just be a part of this. I don't really know why they were selective in what they decided to put in. So maybe it was licensing issues or publisher issues. Konami's kind of a shell of what it used to be, so I don't even know if they have full control over their own catalog anymore with some of the things that have gone on over the years. But yeah, we'll just hang out for a little bit here before I start diving in and see if anybody pops on. I know I've got at least 2 people that watch my channel that are pretty big Castlevania fans, so I was kind of hoping to lure them out. But they might be doing family stuff because obviously it's a big family holiday. I did mine earlier today. Had some turkey that has it is not even 9 o'clock at night. Pretty sleepy, but I'm gonna hang in there because I'm off work tomorrow, and I thought it might be cool to hang out for a little bit, see who's out there. But didn't really have anything else big planned tonight. And if this ends up being a huge embarrassing failure, then I'll just play this, because this is what I was doing last night before Thanksgiving. It came in the mail yesterday, I think. Was it Tuesday? I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. Holiday weeks really throw me off as far as timelines. But yeah, I think this came in the mail on Tuesday. And I started playing it that night. And I played it a little bit last night, but then, yeah, so today's Thursday. Kind of a bummer. I don't know if you can see this, but like the case got smashed in the mail. It's like kind of imprinted in on that side. But I didn't notice until after I ripped off the shrink wrap, and I thought, well, it's kind of rude of me to expect that they were going to exchange it after I've already opened it. So shame on me. I should have left it be and looked it over before I did that. I guess my first clue was when I heard the disc rattling around the case when I took it out of the mail. But you never know with PS4 games, because that seems to be pretty common that the disc gets loose, probably worse than any other console. So I kind of like these PS4 cases, and I kind of don't, for that reason, especially. One thing that would keep the disc in place is if they would put a manual in the case. That would give it some nice little thickness and a barrier in there. This one actually does have a manual / art book / history book, whatever you want to call it. And even that wasn't enough to do the job. But most PS4 games, that's how they get loose, is they have nothing in there holding it in. And then, just one little hit to the case and the chipping, and the disc starts flying everywhere. So, but yeah, I thought, I'd talk a little bit about this and then see, then I'll dive into like all my Castlevania games, see what it looks like on there. But I don't know. We'll kind of go either direction. I can talk about this one first, or I can talk about the old stuff, kind of go either way. Don't really have a massive agenda here tonight, but I guess I can dive into some of the older games first and then circle back to this, see who's playing this collection from Limited Run / Konami / whoever. So I don't know. We'll talk about, I guess, my history with NES games first, kind of where it all started, at least in the US with the series. Obviously, the series has some other games that were exclusive in Japan that we never got. But we started off here, I believe, of any other Castlevania appearances earlier than this in the US with the first NES game. And I can tell you, like, this is one of my all-time favorites. I've really enjoyed this game even to this day. I can pick this game up off the shelf and play it, and it's got very tight controls, nice difficulty challenge. It has kind of like some of the classic hard NES game styles where memorizing the game really helps you, but then it also has some times when it feels like things are more randomized. So it just memorizing and blowing through the stages isn't necessarily going to help you with this game, which is kind of nice to see. Hi, Preferred Dimension. So is that game still available to get from Limited Run? I don't believe it is. So I ordered it back. I'll go back to that for a second. This one. I ordered this back in, I guess it was March or April. And it wasn't one of the ones where they post it and you have like a day or two to get it and then it sells out and it's gone for good. This one was on like an open pre-order. So who knows how many they made, but it was open on pre-order, I want to say, for at least a month. So most people, hopefully were able to find that and get it when it was on the pre-order. And then, of course, we had to wait, 7 months or something like that for it to show up. But I think it's like most of the Limited Run stuff where, once they do that print, then it's gone, unfortunately. I haven't looked on eBay to see if people are scalping this one or if it's just, maybe there's plenty of copies on there, because it was one of those things, I think, since it was like an open pre-order, I think people could order as many copies as they want. It wasn't limited to like one or two customer like a lot of their games are. So I'm sure like even some game retailers probably ordered several copies of this just to be able to sell it in either online or in game stores. That tends to kind of be the case with some of those open pre-order games, because ultimately I think they want to sell as many as they possibly can. I guess would be another tip. I haven't really looked into it too much since it just showed up and I already had it. But yeah, if you're looking for one, hopefully you get it. I mean, it's a pretty cool collection. They did a nice job, really just going into some of the history of the series. It has some like bonus footage and content and things like that. Like it has interviews with the musicians that did some of the work on the game. To me, like there's a few people that would have been nice to hear from that they didn't really talk to, but again, it could have been just availability of the original developers and things like that. But they did try to give you some extras beyond just, a bare bones digital copy or whatever, But also, if you want this game, the easiest way to get it is just download it from the PlayStation Store, because I'm pretty sure this has been out for like maybe even 2 years now. It just took a while to get a physical release. So, but hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll be out there. I mean, like I say, it's not like it's one of the mega limited, like 1,500 press limited run games that they've done. This one they should have made quite a few of, just due to the theories and the fandom and things like that to go with it. So hopefully you find one. So yeah, back to the original Castlevania. I guess I'll talk a little bit more about this one. So I didn't have this game growing up, but one of my close friends did. And every time I'd go over to his house, you know, he'd come over to my house, he'd play my NES games, I'd go over to his house, play his NES games. And we kind of made a pact between us. We're like, try to get things that each of us don't have. So it's like we have this giant NES library. We have all these games we can play. And so that helped out. Like it, you know, we had a good variety of stuff. But I do remember this is one of his favorites. He also had Contra, and I didn't have Contra. And so I would say like it wasn't Contra. It was Super C. So I would go over to his house, you know, pretty much we'd be playing this or we'd be playing Super C. Our two go-tos on NES. But then he purposely didn't buy like some of the Mario games and Zelda games and things like that I had. And so, you know, he'd come over to my house and we'd play those. Were kind of how it went. Or Rad Racer. Like I had Rad Racer and we used to play Rad Racer all the time. So I have some nostalgia with this game. Obviously, I just, you know, I didn't own this personal copy or anything like that when it was new, but definitely played it quite a bit. And he had his NES at least a year before I did. So definitely played a lot of his copy of Castlevania. Let's see who else is popping on. Guns 7469. Hey, happy holidays, man. Good to see you. Just kind of curious if anyone would pop on. I didn't know how busy everyone was at the fams tonight, but figured I'd talk a little bit about the history of Castlevania, my history with Castlevania, not the history of Castlevania. I'm not the definitive source, and just go through some games in my library. But yeah, definitely played this one a lot. Still a big fan of this game. I mean, artwork's really cool in it too. My box is pretty janky. I'm not real proud of this one, but if I ever could get an upgrade of this, I'd like to. You know, overall, this game just felt like something different for the NES. There really wasn't anything that was comparable to this at the time. And then like some of the copycats came after this game. So you had things like Eight Eyes on the NES, which is decent, but it is definitely Castlevania inspired for sure. And you could definitely tell, you know, some of the other companies were watching this game and its popularity and saying like, hey, we want to do something like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about my history with this one. So then moves on from there, and we have the bastard child of the whole series, which I can't really say a whole lot of nice things about, other than the box art's cool on this one too. So this is Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest on NES, and they took a left turn with the series. Kind of felt more like a Zelda 2 style action RPG, and Zelda 2 even had issues. And I think this one had even more. And I just never really got into this game. None of my friends had this. I mean, I was like in prime Nintendo playing age when this game came out. And I don't remember anybody talking about it or caring about it. Even the ones that were fans of the original Castlevania. So, and unfortunately, my box in this one's in much nicer shape. So I wish it was kind of the other way with the first one. So I like the first game so much more. But this is in the compilation. They did put it in. And I don't know, like I just can't see a lot of people getting into this today. It almost just feels like this game would have done better if they didn't call it a Castlevania series game and just made it a spin-off action RPG series of some sort. But obviously, you know, it has some of the original and artwork, and it's not like it's a completely side story game. It has nothing to do with it. But the it's sluggish, just isn't really all that exciting. So. Gunn says he has the Gradius box. Yeah, Gradius, whatever how you're going to pronounce it. That's definitely a cool one too. Has nice artwork on it. The one I'm looking for as far as Konami NES boxes that kind of have the same theme as the one for Stinger or the Twin B series game that's on NES. Very hard box to find. I've got the cartridge and manual, but have never been able to find the box for that one. And early release, and so I just don't think they made a whole lot of them. Preferred Dimension says, I miss how box art looked back then with the 80s and 90s. So much creativity and work were put into the art. Now it's pretty boring. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, one of my friends calls modern games like the Scowling Man games, because that's pretty much all it takes to sell a game in 2021 or even the last decade or so. It's just put some military Scowling Man on the cover, and you got a top selling game, and you'll be good to go. Definitely not as creative as some of the beautiful artwork that was on these games. Even the ones like this that I'm not a really big fan of. Like, I could sit here and stare at this artwork. I just think it's cool. So I missed that, and just some of the creativity that went into it. And then even if you think about like the limited resources that they had to make good quality box art, and they still pulled things like this off, it's kind of sad, that we can't do some of that today. And it's not like there's nothing that looks good today. I mean, there certainly are a few exceptions to the rule, but box art is, it's not the key way that games are sold. So if you think about it, like, you would go to Toys R Us and you'd take the little flip card and you'd look at this, and then you'd flip the little flip card over and it would have all the screenshots in the back, and you'd be like, Simon's Quest looks really neat. I should spend my allowance on that, my $39.99. That's what I want. And then you'd get it home and you'd be really disappointed because this game's not all it's cracked up to be, especially if you're a fan of the first. I think had the series started with this one, or had it been like a side quest game and not part of the regular series numbering, people would probably look back on this one a little more fondly. But to take like such a sharp left turn with the series, was kind of a bummer. So yeah, that's my limited history with Simon's Quest. Didn't play that one all that much. Then we move on to the third game in the NES trilogy, and that is Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. Solid game. Definitely a good comeback from what we saw on Castlevania 2. Very different, obviously. It goes back more to the style of the first game, but then has some other little tricks and things like that thrown in the mix to keep it fresh. This one has branching pathways, which obviously added to the replay value. You don't see, or you didn't see a lot of that in NES games. They were more linear, typically. This game came out in like 1990, I believe. And so it's kind of unusual to see a game take a chance and say like, hey, we're gonna add some replay value here, and it's already challenging in the first place, but you won't really finish the game until you do all the branching paths. So kind of a neat little gimmick, they added to this one. The artwork on this one is good. I think it's a little too busy. Like, you kind of lose the main character art on it. It doesn't stand out, as much as this one, just because it's not the main focus. You got all these enemies and things like that going on with the action scene here. But at least it keeps the theme intact. It still, has the same gray box artwork and overall style. It looks one of a piece with the series, so that's kind of nice. Yeah. Well, that's a cool call out. I never thought about that. So Preferred Dimension says like the whip on the box art for 2 kind of looks like a 2. Never picked up on that. I can kind of see that now. Pretty creative. But, I had this debate a couple days ago with some friends, and I said, hey, Castlevania 1 or Castlevania 3? Like, which is the better game of the two? And it felt like kind of a 50-50 divide. For me, I would probably go with Castlevania 1. I guess I just have a little bit more history with it. I didn't own this game either when it came out. I didn't own any of these on the NES. And even my friend that had Castlevania 1, maybe he was burned by what he heard about Castlevania 2, and so he never got this one either. And so I just don't have the same history with this one. I got it pretty early in my NES buying days, but it wasn't like when it came out or anything like that. I don't have any history with it. But definitely a fun one. Like I said, this is on the new compilation, of course, and plays pretty solid on here too. So you can kind of pick either way. This one also added, I think, like a little bit more about some things like that. Because if you think about like the original game, there really isn't much of story. Like, there's the initial scrolling story when you first start the game, but other than that, like, there's really nothing to transition between scenes. It kind of just feels like one giant level as you play through the castle. But this one, they obviously tried to add a little more story to it and keep you engaged as you went throughout the process. Colors and graphics in this one are okay. Like, if you almost feel like they should be a little better by this point, but obviously a step up from the first game as far as presentation. Stands out pretty good. But overall, I'd prefer the first game. I guess just due to more familiarity. This one, obviously, I can have an enjoyable time. It's definitely a lot better than part 2. So definitely think this one's a good one overall in the series. And you know, a lot of people get to play it now that it's on the compilation, whether you download it or whether you get the physical version of that. It's an easy way to pick this one up and get it. So I'm kind of deciding which direction I want to go here with talking about some of the other ones, because I can go, well, I'm already off if I want to go chronology, you know, in order of release. I can't say the word chronology. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. I can't go in that order because I've already deviated from it. So I guess I'm going to stick with some more of the console games, but I might hop over to some of the portable games. I don't know. It's kind of a messy timeline because even between those 3 NES games, you had the first Game Boy game got released kind of in the middle of all that. So I guess we'll talk about where the series went next, which was outside of the Game Boy games, really the Super Nintendo. And kind of, you know, a different approach. Like Castlevania, the original, the Famicom had been out a few years. It wasn't like it was a launch title or anything like that. And then Super Nintendo comes out in 1991, and like, bam, right away, we're getting Super Castlevania 4. So, you know, as a very early Super Nintendo game, Konami obviously had strong developer team. They were able to pull out some neat tricks. Kind of made it a nice system showpiece for when the system launched, for people to take a look and be like, ooh, you know, this is something different. Now I've got this premium system that can do things that my NES couldn't do. But I almost feel like the game might have been rushed a little bit just for that sake, because they wanted to capitalize on early Super Famicom and Super Nintendo sales. I don't think this game was a launch title, but I would say like in the first month or two, this came out in America, and I believe it was out in time for the holiday season. So I get my Super Nintendo the first year? I think I got my Super Nintendo the second year, so I didn't get this game at launch or anything like that. And I really didn't know anybody that did. Most of my friends that went beyond NES at that point had Genesis, I would say, more so. And so I got Super Nintendo pretty early. I had to wait to get my NES several years, but my parents were nice and got me a Super Nintendo. I think the second year it was out. And I was kind of picking and choosing which games I wanted to get. And this one was kind of one of the ones that I thought would be up there. But ultimately, I picked something else and probably should have gone with this. But this one is sort of a remake of the first game. So it's not even really like an all new title. And maybe there again is some of that rushing it to market coming to play, that they didn't have time to write an all new story and, you know, all that kind of thing. But yeah, some big boss characters in this one. I think that's really neat. Makes use of some of the like Mode 7 effects and all that Super Nintendo jazz, you know, that kind of made the system stand out. Everyone knows Super Nintendo runs kind of sluggish, but this game doesn't really seem affected by that. It moves at a good pace. You know, and Castlevania games aren't super fast paced anyway, so I guess maybe that made it a good fit for the system overall. But yeah, this one is definitely solid. I mean, I could pick up and play this one right now. But again, I just don't have a lot of nostalgia for this one. And I think if I was going to pick the best 16-bit one, this would probably be lower on the list compared to some of the other ones we're going to look at. So, but definitely a cool one. And then I guess just collector-wise, what's worth noting on this one is if you want the best version of this, you have to kind of look, because this game did get a repress. It was one of the Majesco re-release games that came out late in the Super Nintendo life to kind of reinvigorate some sales of the software. And those were the ones that were made in Mexico. So like the quality of the boxes was much less. The artwork's kind of grainy. And then they had in a case backability, they were just like paper versus glossy. So if you really want a nice copy of this, you have to track down the original pressing, which does kind of stand out when you look at them side by side. But that's just kind of the collector scum approach and kind of what that looks like. Preferred Dimension says, Simon's theme is a classic, one of my favorite video game songs of all time. Castlevania overall just has great music. I mean, I think I was going to refer to that in a few of these other titles. And you know, I just think that they put a lot of effort into the music in their games, which is something that stood out. Like, even if you listen to the or read the interview with one of the musicians that worked on the games and overall in the series, Konami was like heavily investing in that. Like, you know, we want to make the music in this game really stand out. We want to make it memorable. So you take your time, you do it right. Like we'll make sure that you are rewarded for a nice job with the music on the game. So I thought that was kind of neat. You know, didn't necessarily get that all the time. So yeah, this is on the compilation as well. So I mean, you know, another game that's easy to play through that. And I can kind of keep this one in storage for now. But I guess we'll talk about some of the other 16-bit games, and then I might deviate and talk about some of the portable games. So I'll give my insights on those. We're going to talk about the one people got to play if they didn't have a Super Nintendo. So that was in North America. It was Castlevania Bloodlines. Really excellent release on the Genesis. And now that I got the compilation, this is the one I found myself playing the most. The music in this one is awesome. And it's even more impressive because the Genesis sound chips are not in most cases. So to make that system sound so good with good quality music is kind of a but very memorable soundtrack of this one. And I think this was the first game that the primary musician, when she joined the team, this was the first game she worked on, and then she stayed with the series for like another 15 or 20 years or whatever after that. So for a rookie composing job, very excellent. Really like the graphics in this. They're, you know, a little different. I mean, they don't feel as rigid. They're more playful, I guess would be the word. Some of the power-ups look different. They took some liberties with the series, I guess is what I want to say. And if you really think about the style of the presentation, I think it stands out that like some of the developers that were with Konami at the time were the team that went on to form Treasure soon after. So if you look at like some of the you know, rotation and things like that they were doing with the bosses, and then you go play something like Gunstar Heroes that was developed by Treasure, like Konami, you're like, oh, well, I can kind of see where that came from. You know, there's kind of some correlation there. I would probably say the same thing about the Contra game on the Genesis, Contra Hardcore. It feels one of a piece with this game, as well as some of the later Treasure releases that had some similar graphic tricks, but very talented team that put this together. I mean, you can tell they really knew how to push the hardware, do some things with the bosses that you know, we hadn't seen before, especially even with like the Super Nintendo game. And then I guess the other thing I would add about this one is it kind of has like just more gore to it than what we'd ever seen with Castlevania games before. You know, it has lines in the title, and there's like dripping blood all over the stages as you go through them. I mean, just random things are bleeding all the time. I don't know if Nintendo would have gone for that. And then, you know, ratings wise, it gets just a nice, before there was the E rating, it gets a nice GA. Like, this is for everybody. Good old blood and guts everywhere. But even some of the bosses, you know, like are kind of gruesome, much more so than what we saw in the prior games. So I just think it's kind of neat that they try to do something a little more adult with this one, with some of the art design. And, you know, again, they didn't necessarily feel like they had to stick to the rule book. There were some things with the level design that were very unique, and some different power-ups and things that we probably never even saw in the series after this game. So just feels like kind of a standalone piece. And then I don't think we ever got another game that was really like this one, because what I was saying is like the primary people that worked on this game were the ones that left to form Treasure. So with them out of the mix, Konami didn't have that resource to leverage with a style of game again. So but definitely a fun game, and very challenging. I mean, there's a long quest with this one, and it's not, which obviously you can save state with the new one, but that was, you know, a little bit different. Some of the other ones were more just like you had to play them all in one sitting, or that was all you got. So they knew this one was going to take a little more time, so they gave you the password system, which was kind of nice. But the passwords were kind of annoying, and, you know, like here I'm opening up my copy, and I've got a Post-it note with my passwords, but like the passwords were like on a grid. It's kind of Mega Man style. You had to put in a heart or a bow or a whip or whatever in different spots on a grid to get yourself back to the level that you're on. So yeah, kind of funny with that one. So we're going to talk a little more about, I'm going to put it in quotations, 16-bit Castlevania. But this is one we didn't get here in the US. And obviously, its availability has increased with some compilations and things we've seen more recently. But this is the one that was always like the forbidden fruit of the series. So this is for the Japanese PC Engine, or TurboGrafx CD, Super CD technically. This is the Dracula X, Rondo Blood, as it's known. It also has like a much longer Japanese title. This game was very commonly imported in the US because there were a lot of people that had, when I say a lot of people, the people that had, let's put it that way, the people that had a Turbo Duo or Turbo CD with Super Card were really starved for games, some of the CD games toward the end of the Duo life in the US. And this, there were lots of rumors. I got lots of magazines from the era that were saying like, oh yeah, we're going to release that in the US. And then they didn't. And then people panicked and they it. So I think a lot of copies made it into the US regardless, a relatively lot. But then I also say, this is a 16-bit game, sort of, because technically the engine is an 8-bit console with like two 8-bit CPUs. It's complicated. But what you did get with this that was the big benefit over the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions of the game was this one had the full CD, quality soundtrack on it. So you get that wonderful Castlevania music, but for the first time in the US, it's on, well, not even in the US, for the first time, it's on CD. So it sounds just so much better. It's got the Red Book audio, as they called it back in the day. This one is obviously in Japanese, so you can't necessarily read along whenever you're going through the issues. But what's neat about this one is it does include some beautiful cutscenes, so you can really follow along the story with those. And even that brought something new. It's not something we ever saw with the series prior that I'm aware of, that you had cutscenes and things like that to kind of show you the way. So this game, like I say, become easier to play. You're going to see a US release of it proper that it's on, and then obviously there's some other ways to play it. But I say this was probably with the PS4 collection is this game is not on the collection. And that seems crazy to me because this was released right in the era of all the other games that they put out. Plus, for most of us, this is a forbidden fruit and really difficult to play unless you got the proper hardware with this or one of the re-releases to play the game. But very rewarding game. Third Dimension says, played the PSP version of the game. It's great. Still need to play the original and finish it. Yeah. We're going to talk about that one here shortly, but I definitely agree. This is one that I got my Duo, I guess, around like year 2000. And this was one of the first games that I had to buy for it. And even then, what's kind of funny about this game's expensive now, but it really has never changed in price. This game was pretty much the same price for the last 20 years. So there's always plenty of copies out there if you're looking for one. It never goes down in price, but it also never really goes up. I think it's just due to the amount of these that ended up in the US are always decent. So, it's not like this is the only way you could play it, which I think held some people back for a long time. But really a lot of fun. And as far as gameplay control, I don't think you're going to find controls better than this. It's super tight. It's super responsive. If you miss a jump, you will know it is your fault. There's no cheapness to it, like you even saw with some of the other games. Very rewarding. So, and then, I think the other thing that's interesting is it's in Japanese on the text, but then some of the voice acting of this one is in German. So if you speak German, I guess you can kind of follow along with it. For me, it's moon language either way. But I'm sure the story in this one's pretty interesting, if it had it all translated. But either way, like I say, you can follow along with cutscenes, kind of see what's going on. But can highly recommend this one if you, want the proper original release of it, or you just want to play it with some of the other means that there are out there now. Really, really fun game. And looks like a couple other people have popped on, so I don't know who's out. I'm wondering if some of my Castlevania-loving friends have popped in, and I can give you kind of an update on where we are. But really just going through my library of Castlevania series games. thoughts all along the way, my thoughts, my history with them, things like that. It's pretty casual. Just seeing how things go. I think with that, that pretty much covers the 8-bit console, 16-bit console era Castlevania games. So I'm going to move on and talk about the portable releases, I guess, go into those, and then I might bounce back to some console. So as far as the Game Boy goes, Game Boy got a lot of love in the Castlevania series, and kind of surprisingly so, or Nintendo brand portable series systems, a love in the Castlevania series. But this is where it kicked off, was with you can definitely tell that it's a side story. It's not like meant to be a part of the proper timeline of all the NES games that were released. I think this one released after Simon's Quest, but then before 3. And once again, you got some awesome artwork on there. You can make that out. Just really, really cool box art on this. But the game, this one is... I can't fault it much. It was essentially a launch title for the Game Boy. May have been a launch title. It came out within the first couple months, if not. And I think they just didn't really know how to pro because it was so new. But your character moves glacially slow in this. And the character art is crude as well. Like the Game Boy could do a lot better. And even the music's disappointing. I don't really think this one's going to be one of the ones that people jump out to listen to the soundtrack. So, I appreciate that they wanted to get a Castlevania game out there, but as we've seen with some of these other systems, you kind of get not the best in the series. So this one is on the new collection as well. You can see if you've ever taken the dive into the Game Boy release. I was lucky to get this complete in the box a few years ago. This one really actually a box protector on it. But if you just want the cartridge of this one, it's actually one of the cheapest Castlevania games you can get. They sold a ton of this, and probably because it doesn't have the best reputation, it's a pretty easy one to get your hands on. So, yeah, definitely not a great starting point for the series if you've never played Castlevania before. But if you're curious, or if you just like portable games, worth checking out, I guess just for that purpose. The other thing about this one, I just almost missed. I don't have it, but there is a Japanese Game Boy Color remake of this game. And so they kind of went through and updated palettes and things like that, and actually added some color to it and designed it to be, like a Game Boy Color game that would be enhanced beyond just like popping it in a Super Game Boy and having some of the colors created for you. So I'd like to get that. I think there's one for this. I wonder if it's a collection of 4 games. I want to say it's a collection of like 4 games and has 2 Castlevanias, or maybe, that's what I think. I think it's 2 separate 4-game packs of Konami classics, and then there's 2 of the Castlevania games, 1 on each pack. So you have to get both of them if you want to have the enhanced versions. But definitely kind of neat that exists. So, what's more Game Boy games, I guess? I see Duke has joined on Homie. We had a good Thanksgiving. So then we'll move on to Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. This one's actually really good. I think they learned from that first Game Boy game and made a quick correction. I don't have this one complete. I wish I did. This would kind of be high up there on my want list. But you can kind of see the artwork on the cartridge, maybe. Glass of lighting down here is bad. But anyway, it has cool artwork on it. I think I have a manual for this too. I just don't have the box. But this one wrote the issues with Castlevania, and it didn't come out that much later. I think it came out like 91, I had to guess. The pace of the game is much better. The character art is much better. The stages are kind of interesting. It lets you stage select, so you don't have to play them in order, which you kind of had to do with all the Castlevania games up to this point. Except in 3 that had the branching paths, but this one lets you pick a level from the very start. You got 4 levels you can choose from. So they definitely took some chances there. And the other thing that you'll notice about this, the other Castlevania Game Boy games, is it's a side scroller, but you scroll to the left on a lot of stages. I don't really know what the intention was with that, because that was kind of revolutionary. A lot of early side scrolling games, you always scroll to the right. So they kind of mixed it up with that a little bit. And then the other thing I'll say about Belmont's Revenge is the music on this one is great. Like, absolutely great. I was playing the PS4 compilation version the other day, and I was like, is this Game Boy? Like, this is a very nice, memorable soundtrack in this game. They did a really nice job with the limited sound chips that the Game Boy has, and really made this one good. I don't know. I'm really enjoying this. It was probably like the nicest surprise I got from revisiting some of the games on the compilation was that Belmont's Revenge is legit. Like, they really knew what they were doing with this one. And then, unfortunately, this is where it ended as far as what they put on the compilation. They didn't put the other two games I'm going to show you in there. So you still track those own. But this one's a really good one overall. Very pleased with that, what they were able to pull off with early limited Game Boy hardware. So we're going to take a look at the next Game Boy release, which was a game. And this did come out on the Famicom in Japan, but it did not come out on the NES. And a few years later, it resurfaced as a Game Boy release. So this is Kid Dracula. And it is loosely based on the Castlevania story, but heavily inspired by the themes in Castlevania. And you'll see a lot of callbacks to Castlevania games in it. So, like the clockwork scenes from Castlevania 3, you basically play on those. Classic themes, but it's more of like a cutesy action platformer, meant to be taken seriously, and probably meant to be, more of a younger audience. Maybe this is meant to be your gateway drug into Castlevania if you're really young. You're like, oh, I'm going to play this before I play those grown-up Castlevania games with all the blood dripping everywhere, like a boy game. But in Japan, I think it obviously was much more popular because it originally was a Famicom release, and then they obviously got this Game Boy game too. So the big surprise of the new collection is one has the Famicom version of the game on it. So it actually does have some of the Japanese releases in the pack, and they did give us the Famicom version of this in here. So now that we have that, this kind of becomes less relevant because I don't really think that this one's any better. Obviously, the Famicom has more power. And I just think it's neat they included that. So I think for most people, this is probably going to be their first ever playing Kid Dracula because the game is very obscure in the US and it just doesn't have that much history behind it, that people would know about it. So neat, I guess would be the way to describe that. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. A huge fan of Kid, but I like cutesy action platformers. So as far as that and lighthearted fare, it fits the Game Boy pretty well. Obviously, no real technical pushing hardware issues. It moves at a decent pace, things like that. But this one, I don't know. Like I didn't even hear this leak when it came out. Like I had no idea this was even a thing. And even if I did, I probably would have blown it off as like, oh, that's just a game. Like it doesn't say like Castlevania Kid Dracula. I'm gonna check in with the chat. I haven't heard too much. Looks like we got a few more people in. I don't know who else is on. Kind of curious how everyone's Thanksgiving went. Maybe you're all in food comas. You're just got this on the background, getting ready to pass out for the night. Who knows? But yeah, we'll check in and see how everyone's doing. I guess while we move on, about the last, I should have known. Yes, for any that I have that are watching today, it's just a Thursday. There's nothing special about today. Well, and honestly, it's not that special here. It's just more like a day that we close most of the businesses and just get fat. So can't complain about that. It's also known as a 4-day weekend in my case because I took off tomorrow. Had to burn a vacation day, but it was totally worth it because why not loop around and make an easy 4-day weekend out of just taking one day off. So, perk of the holiday. Let's see. Still it will. We'll go with that. You can correct me if I don't have that right. Food coma right now, about to fall asleep to some Castlevania talk. Okay, good. I'm glad I what's that called? NyQuil essentially, I'm your virtual NyQuil tonight. Hopefully I can get that. So we're going to look at the last game on the original Game Boy. And this one is really not very well acclaimed. It's Castlevania Legends. And I'm going to be the contrarian and say I really like this game. I think that, I don't know, it gets cast off because it was a very late release original Game Boy title. This came out like approximately the same time as Symphony of the Night. So kind of get your head around that. It's very unusual that they're still pumping out an original. So maybe it was people expecting this to be like Symphony of the Night for the Game Boy. I mean, it is very much like the original Castlevania games. But what is interesting about this one is this is the first time that you had a primary character in the game. And it really does have a very long experience, which you wouldn't expect for a Game Boy release. Usually you play a Game Boy game and the levels are intended to be very short and plentiful. Like if you're on the go and you got 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, you're going to play a little bit of it, turn it off, write down the page, whatever. The levels in this game are incredibly long. Like I'm probably between 20 to 25 minutes each. It's pretty unheard of. I mean, even the console Castlevania had shorter levels in this. So if you're going to sit down and play this, you kind of got to be to it and say like, hey, I'm on the go. I may need some extra travel time to get some gameplay in on this one. But it is really worth it. No, this just doesn't have much of a reputation at all. It's very difficult to find, so maybe just a lot of people didn't play it in the first place. And good. The other things I'll say about this one is it was enhanced for the Super Game Boy. So while it wasn't like a Game Boy Color release, which would have been like another year or two, they at least tried to make it nice and pretty if you play it on a Super Game Boy. So it's got like the custom borders and all that kind of stuff and enhanced color palette. So I kind of like playing it that way. I'll pop it into like my GameCube Game Boy player or pop it in a Super Boy, and you get to kind of see the enhancements that they made for the console. So they put some effort into it there. The other thing I think drives people away with this one is like it's considered that they armed the development of this one to like Konami's C team, I guess I would say. I think it was like their like, here's our office out in the country that doesn't get all the A titles. Like, we'll just let them make a Castlevania game and see how that works out. Late release Game Boy title, ship it kind of sailed. Maybe just see what we could get out of it, or if something inspires people, like it'll turn into a console release later on or whatever. But I don't think the game sold well, and now an incredibly expensive game to find in the US. Mine's not in mint shape by any means, and I would love to have this game complete. But I rarely, if ever, see it. I saw a complete copy at a con earlier this year that had water damage all over the box, and they wanted $850, I believe. That's what the asking price was. And yeah, I'm not going to pay that for it. But even if I'm this cartridge only, I don't know what the going rate is for this one, but I know it's got to be up there because there's just not a whole lot of. I would love to see them like. I talked about those, and then I guess that's the other big bummer. They put the first two Game Boy games on the new compilation, but not this one. I don't know why it's a game would take up any space. But it's a shame because I really think more people should play this game. Castlevania Legends is underrated in my book, and very unusual, as far as the timing of that one. So I'm going to circle back to a 16-bit game that I missed to talk about. Not one of my favorites in the series. Also very expensive. That is Castlevania Dracula X. And I just said all those nice things about Rondo of Blood. And this is essentially based on Rondo of Blood. And wow, does it lose like everything that makes Rondo of Blood great. So, like, you can't even really treat this as like a budget version of Rondo of Blood because this was also very expensive. Like, this silly cartridge costs a ton of money too. I don't know what the market price this is. $200, $250, something like that. it's nuts. That's why I don't have this one complete either. But it, tries to take some of the things from Rondo of Blood and then apply it into the Super Nintendo, but you lose that beautiful CD soundtrack, and some of the levels don't play as well. The game is off scenes. It just has some things that the Super Nintendo couldn't do because it wasn't on a CD, and that's what the game was really intended for. I'm guessing they farmed this off to one of their lesser studios as well. Like, I'm sure the PC Engine original was the one that they really invested all the money into, and then this one was like, hey, do a quick and dirty port of that to the Super Nintendo so we can help out the Super Nintendo audience or Super Famicom audience. But you do get the cool artwork on it. I will say that it's got essentially the same artwork or similar artwork as the PC Engine game, so can't fault it for that. Would love to have this one in the box as well, but obviously this one goes for like, I don't even know, probably $700, $800, $900 as well, complete in the box. Something absurd, I'm sure. But the other thing about this one is it was kind of a 4 that came out like right around launch time. Had a lot of people interested, sold very, very well, got re-released. Like a lot of people know that game. This game came out late in 1995. Super Nintendo was like already on the downturn. PS1, Saturn are hitting the market. Now you're going to release essentially a 2-year-old PC Engine game that's now watermelon. Like, they missed out. If they could have put this out at the same time as PC Engine game, probably would have sold pretty well. Just because, for the convenience factor or higher install base of Super Nintendo. But by the time this came out, limited market with Super Nintendo and the newcomers, I don't think the game had distribution. Like, I was shopping games when this game came out, and I don't remember ever seeing this in a store. So they obviously didn't print a whole lot of copies of this one either. But yeah, that's kind of the other oddball. Nobody really talks about the Super Nintendo version of this, but probably for good reason. It's not considered, one of the classics of the series. It's really just a watered down version of Rondo of Blood. So that kind of takes care of the 16-bit series, I think, for real. Let me ask the group, like, what kind of Castlevania games are your favorites before I start ripping into some of the classics I'm expecting to hear.